What are three of the biggest questions for this Denver Broncos football team heading into Monday's season opener against the Seattle Seahawks? We take a look at who will start at right tackle for the Broncos team, and can the Broncos avoid a slow start contrary to what another team on Thursday Night Football did? And what are some Broncos player props that we have our eyes on against the Seattle Seahawks? You get that and much more in today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome into a brand new episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos country for tuning in and making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day, every single day, whether you listen to us on your favorite audio podcasting platform or whether you watch us on YouTube. We appreciate you so much. Don't forget to comment on this YouTube video along the way. Answer the question of the day down below in the comment section, and make sure you hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content coverage, and more from the South Stands to the end zone. I'm your host, as always, Cody, Roark, Broncos beat reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside by my co-host, Sayre, Bedinger, site expert, predominantly orange.com. Sayre, my friend, we're just a couple of days away from kickoff here for this Denver Broncos season opener. Back on the road, Monday Night Football against the Seattle Seahawks. Russell Wilson taking on his former team. We've built that storyline up all throughout the week, but now we still have some questions that we still have remaining here for this Broncos football team, including who will start at right tackle for this team. Can't wait to break it all down with you, my man.
I'm excited too, Cody. I'm excited that football is back. Look, the NFC West, hey, they're already 0-1 this week in week one of the NFL season. So, hey, let's keep it going, or let's actually finish it off on Monday night, right? But no, I'm excited as well because you know what? We haven't got to see, at least most of us haven't got to see the Broncos' top offense out there in action in a game situation. And I know they've simulated some of those things in training camp and the joint practices with the Dallas Cowboys a few weeks back, but man, it's going to be so cool just to see everybody out there for the first time on the field playing together in a meaningful game. And yeah, the right tackle position, that's been a subject of conversation kind of all offseason, hasn't it? I mean, I know when the Broncos originally signed Billy Turner, we kind of thought, well, that's going to be the solution at right tackle. But heading into week one, I mean, he hasn't practiced a ton. So it's going to be fascinating to see who do they go with for week one. Is it going to be Billy Turner? Is it going to be Calvin Anderson? It'll be fun to see.
Well, I think that's the biggest question right now. We have no idea going into week one what it's going to look like, because for us, I mean, Billy Turner didn't return to practice until like the final week of training camp, in a sense, where media was allowed to watch the entirety of practice there. Didn't participate in team drills from our standpoint there, but on Thursday's practice, he was limited, which usually means a limited participation means that you engage in position-specific drills. So maybe this is just the buildup. Maybe this is because he's a veteran player. This is just the buildup, and they believe that, you know, maybe he can go in there and be ready to go. I think we're going to continue to monitor that, and we'll find out, I think, obviously, heading into Monday's matchup, who gets the start. But Calvin Anderson has been the guy getting all the reps throughout training camp. You know, he's been rotating in with Cam Fleming throughout training camp, different practices, but he's been primarily the right tackle one option when we talk about practice during training camp. When we talk about preseason games, he's been the guy that's been getting all the reps there. And I actually had a chance to talk to Calvin Anderson this week in the Broncos locker room, and one of the things I asked him, you know, especially like in the preseason, we talk about teams don't show much as to like what they're going to do, right? So you factor in the Seahawks have a multitude of pass rushers, Uchenna Nwosu, Boye Mafe, and Darrell Taylor here. So when you prepare for an opponent, but you don't know necessarily what stunts they may throw at you, how do you prepare about it? And Calvin told me, you know, you really have to study the player. You know, how wide does he line up? What are some of his tendencies just as a player? Like, even if they're not executing a lot of the stuff that they're going to do schematically with their stunts in the preseason, you can still study a little bit of the player to pick up on some tendencies there. And then Calvin said you just have to play within the system from there, making sure that you have communication really solid on the offensive line. So if he's, you know, at right tackle when he's getting the start, he's got to communicate with Quinn Miners at the right guard position. You know, if there's a certain alignment, if this guy's going to crash in, hey, we're going to double team and then we'll pin and pull at this point. These are things that I'm looking forward to seeing. But I think another question too, let's say Billy Turner gets to start on Monday Night Football, hypothetically speaking, Sayre. Will that benefit the Broncos or will that hurt them? Because he hasn't been able to do a lot of team reps, and chemistry is so important to me. That is a huge question that I personally have.
Yeah, it is. And yes, Billy Turner is a veteran player, so he's been out there for a lot of different games, and the Green Bay Packers specifically called on him to play a lot of different spots on that offensive line, essentially every spot but the center position, right? So he's no stranger to kind of being thrown out there in these kind of situations. The issue is health, right? It's not just say, hey, you've been playing, right guard or right tackle all season. We need you to fill in at left tackle because David Bakhtiari is injured. No, it's you have barely practiced all offseason, and now we want to throw you up against these live reps when you haven't had hardly any. So that kind of leads me to believe that maybe it is going to be Calvin Anderson, Cody, getting the start in this game, and maybe he'll be kind of on a, kind of watch and see type of approach from this coaching staff where, hey, you could throw Billy Turner in there and say if things are going really poorly for Calvin Anderson, get Billy Turner out there, get the veteran guy out there, or Cam Fleming for that matter. So it's going to be one of those things where I think the health situation of Billy Turner, the Broncos do trust him. Nathaniel Hackett has spoken to that they, hey, he's a veteran guy. We're going to let him kind of make that decision. If he feels good about getting out there, right, against these live pass rush reps, especially against a guy like Boye Mafe, who, man, I mean, he's bringing a lot of athleticism, length, strength, power, speed, and really just kind of this blissful ignorance of like, hey, I'm a rookie. I can kind of go out here and do almost whatever I want to do. It's like I'm playing a little bulletproof out here. I feel like, man, that's a situation where you're going to want to be careful if you're the Broncos. The Seahawks are going to try to muddy that pocket for Russell Wilson. They're going to try to make things difficult for him as possible. So it's up to the offensive line to go out there and really perform at a high level. And if Billy Turner, I mean, he has to gauge. He has to be very, very clear. Yes, I can help the team, or I can help the team down the line, or I can be available in a pinch. He's got to kind of make that decision, and we'll see. I mean, we'll see what the repercussions are for the Broncos, but it's certainly one of the biggest decisions, I think, on the offensive side heading into this game.
Well, and I think about it as well, for Billy Turner, as long as he's been in the league and has as valuable he's been for the Packers, for the Broncos in the past, doing a lot of things that they asked him to do. For me, you've made this huge investment in Russell Wilson, right? So if you've been working with these guys, this offensive line, all throughout training camp, maybe you want to keep that together. And as you mentioned, maybe down the line, maybe Billy Turner can step in and help. You never know what's going to happen in an NFL game. We never know what's going to happen in an NFL season. So I think how the Broncos approach this, and I think the solution, whoever starts at right tackle, will be a very interesting storyline to follow here in Broncos country. Broncos country, let us know down below who you want to start, Calvin Anderson or Billy Turner on Monday Night Football against the Seattle Seahawks. But coming up here in just a moment, Broncos country, another question that we have heading into Monday's matchup. Will not playing any of the starters in preseason affect the Broncos negatively? We saw something happen with the Los Angeles Rams against the Buffalo Bills on Thursday Night Football to kick off the season. Could that impact the Denver Broncos? We get to that coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about LinkedIn, the sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. And as you gear up for fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. And simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. On Thursday Night Football, the Buffalo Bills ransacked the Los Angeles Rams, and there's been a key storyline that could impact the Denver Broncos that has been brought up from that game. Broncos country, thank you so much for tuning in, making Lockdown Broncos your first listen of the day every single day, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts or whether you watch us on YouTube. Lockdown Broncos is your team every day, and when we say that, we mean that. Your team. Everything you want to know about the Denver Broncos, what's going on with them, you get it here every single day. Locked on Broncos. Sayre, my friend, Thursday Night Football to kick off the week 1 of the NFL regular season. The Buffalo Bills taking on the defending Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams on Thursday. The Bills, They played their starters in the preseason, and we saw how that panned out against the Broncos in that Week 2 preseason matchup. They obviously took it to the Denver Broncos in that game, and they looked like a well-oiled machine on Thursday Night Football. The Los Angeles Rams did not play any of their starters in the preseason, and they came out and they looked very sluggish, to be honest with you, in that game there, and it got away from them pretty much early on, towards the end of that first half. Is this a concern here? I know this is something that Broncos fans wanted to know, and I think I've seen this question posed many times on social media. Should the Broncos be worried when they look at the LA Rams, who have experience, who were just coming off of the Super Bowl win in February, looking the way they did without playing any of the starters in the preseason? And also going back to like the Green Bay Packers last year, when Aaron Rodgers and the Packers struggled against the New Orleans Saints in that Week 1 opener.
I just wish, Cody, that there could be like an alert on Twitter. Like if your fan base is clearly pushing the panic button, like you can actually see like blinking red lights or something, so you could know to stay off Twitter when the panic button is being pressed. I think definitely there's a lot of concerns from Broncos fans, at least that I saw on Twitter during that game on Thursday night, Cody, and I know you did as well, over the fact that even Tony Dungy brought it up on the broadcast on NBC talking, and he actually lumped the Bills in, which he was incorrect about. But the not playing in the preseason thing, I think, is going to pop up all throughout the NFL in Week 1, and certainly as teams look sloppy. But to me, I'm not pressing the panic button on this, Cody, and there's one primary reason why. The primary reason why is actually it's twofold. It's, first of all, the Buffalo Bills might be the best overall team in the NFL, right, on paper, and they're healthy right now, and they're playing. They, like you said, they're a well-oiled machine. This is a team that the majority of these guys have been together for a long time, and they're gelling. They have chemistry. They don't even necessarily need those preseason reps, but they did get a few. And again, it was like 2 drives in the preseason. So is that really the difference between beating the reigning Super Bowl champions by 21 points or not? I think you got to kind of step back and really evaluate this on a case-by-case basis. The second reason, Cody, that I'm not pressing the panic button at all on this, the Los Angeles Rams are not as good of a team in 2022 as they were in 2021, especially at the end of the season. And that goes on both sides of the ball. You look at just the offensive line. The Rams are breaking in a brand new left tackle, Joe Noteboom. So obviously he struggled with Von Miller and the pressure that the Buffalo Bills were bringing. They have new edge players. There's no more Von Miller in Los Angeles. So it's Leonard Floyd. And who else? Can any of the listeners in the comments, without Googling it, can you name another pass rusher on the Rams? And Justin Hollins doesn't count. So I think, Cody, it's just not as good of a Rams team, right? Frankly, I mean, they don't have as good of a roster this year. That's a lot of what happens when you win the Super Bowl. We saw that with the Denver Broncos. You can't afford to keep everybody, and that really hurt the Rams. Not to mention, Matthew Stafford just didn't look himself out there, and I don't think that has anything to do with preseason reps. We've been hearing dating back to November last season, he's got an issue with his arm, some chronic back pain. There's things going on with the Rams that are beyond preseason reps mattering. So I think I'm not pressing the panic button. Those are the primary reasons why at this point, but I know there's even more layers to that discussion.
Well, and I think it's a great thing that you brought that up and kind of provided a little bit of logic to something that it's very low-hanging fruit, right? And everyone's going to grab onto that. Well, they didn't play the starters in the preseason. This is why they look bad. You touched on it. The Rams, I don't believe, are a better team, and we saw that. I mean, Buffalo, we talked about it. Going into the season, I think everyone was talking about the Buffalo Bills and how they're probably going to be the favorite for the Super Bowl, and they looked exactly like it. I mean, they have a high-octane offense and they have a prolific quarterback, but, the Rams, you mentioned all the losses that they've had on the defensive side of the ball. The interior of the offensive line is also a little suspect there, where they gave up some pressure there. And you go to Matthew Stafford's elbow. It definitely looked like he didn't have as much zip on his passes that he normally would have there. So I think those are all factors, but when it pertains to this Denver Broncos football team, Sayre, and even if the Broncos get off to a little bit of a slow start, here's what I want to put into perspective. What's the opportunity cost, right? Okay, Week 1? Yeah. I mean, it's a big Week 1 game in terms of like the narratives. And as you and I have talked about, for the Seattle Seahawks, this is their Super Bowl in Week 1. For the Broncos, this is a game, and it's just a game. And the hyperbole, the narratives around Russ's return to Seattle, I mean, that's big and all, but even Russ is treating this just like a game. And for the Broncos and for Broncos fans, you should just treat this like just another game, because there's a 17-game regular season. There are 16 other games after Week 1, and even if the Broncos get off to a slow start and win the game, it is not a cause for concern, in my opinion. The Broncos are actually in a good position right now too, Sayre, because they're entering a game, what seems like for the first time in forever, fully healthy for the most part with all their major players on the defensive side of the ball. That to me, I think, is a huge thing. And so for me, I'm not as concerned about not playing in the preseason, and I do stand by Nathaniel Hackett's decision not to.
I agree completely. And I think that's arguably the most important reason why you don't play the starters is exactly what you just mentioned. Can anybody remember the last time you made it into a regular season with all your starters in the starting lineup? And of course, we understand Tim Patrick is not going to be out there. He got injured in training camp. He wasn't injured in those kinds of things do happen. But for the most part, you're going into the regular season, which is crazy, going into the regular season with your majority of your starting lineup. And it's not like, it's not like pieces here and there are missing. It's like one guy that wasn't projected or that was projected to be a starter is not going to be out there. And that's Tim Patrick. And that includes Jonas Griffith, who's going to be out there after dislocating his elbow barely 3 weeks ago. So to me, Cody, that opportunity cost, those different things that you talk about, a 17-game season, getting to this game healthy and getting out of this game healthy, quite frankly, are huge goals for the Broncos. And I saw a comment, so we know, like, I can speak freely on this now and not feel bad about saying it. I saw a comment from a Seahawks fan on Twitter talking about how they want to win 3 games this year. They want to beat Russell Wilson and they want to beat the San Francisco 49ers twice. So we know this game means more to the Seattle Seahawks than pretty much any of us could quantify going in. Like they want the draft pick. They want to go 3-14 and get CJ Stroud or Bryce Young or whoever else. And they want to beat Russell Wilson. Those are the 2 things that they want the most. So to me, Cody, I feel like obviously this game means a lot to the Seattle Seahawks, and it means a lot to the Denver Broncos as well. But I don't think not playing in the preseason is an excuse for people to go out and say, well, the Broncos overlooked the Seahawks, or, well, the Broncos just don't really care about this game, or this, that, and the other. It's all bull. So the Broncos do care about this game. They care about it so much they actually wanted to get their best players on the field to play in it. So that's where I stand on it.
I love it. In Broncos country, we're always eager for your thoughts down below. What are your thoughts on the Broncos' decision not to play the starters in the preseason? Do you think it'll have any impact on the regular season? We personally don't believe that it will, but we always value your feedback and your input. But coming up here in just a moment, we're going to play a little bit of a fun game, and we want you all to play along with us, whether you're listening on your favorite audio podcasting platform, whether you're watching on YouTube. We're going to get into some Broncos player props against the Seattle Seahawks. And something along the lines of who catches the first touchdown pass, who rushes for the first touchdown, who gets the first defensive takeaway, and who gets the first sack. We're going to play that coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about BetOnline.net, the sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. And BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports information this season. You can find all the latest football league developments, game matchup, news, and including this year's opening week games. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf, is BetOnline.net. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, we're going to take a look at some Broncos player props against the Seattle Seahawks on Monday Night Football. Thank you so much once again, Broncos Country, for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day on your favorite audio podcasting platform. Whether you watch us on YouTube, you get all your daily Denver Broncos news content coverage here, the Locked On Broncos podcast. Sayre, my friend, let's continue on with today's episode of the show. And our users and listeners and watchers are all encouraged to play along. You can tweet us on Twitter at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Locked On Broncos with your picks, or you can comment down below in the YouTube comments section. Let's get into some player props here. And I think the first one, pretty much an exciting one. Who catches the first touchdown pass for this Denver Broncos football team in week 1? Or does it happen in week 1? Who do you have here in this category, Sayre?
You know, Cody, I'm predicting Jerry Jeudy is going to break the drought. I was looking it up the other day. It's been over 600 days since Jerry Jeudy caught an NFL touchdown pass. We all remember it was that big 92-yard score against the Raiders back in the 2020 season, the final game of the 2020 season. It's been a long, long time for Jerry Jeudy. And so I'm not saying that I think the Broncos are going to force feed it, Cody, but I do think that they know, they understand. Obviously, Jerry Jeudy knows. He commented about it at the end of last season. I think the Broncos understand, hey, Jerry, he's due, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say that Jerry Jeudy catches the first touchdown of the 2022 season. What do you say?
I'm going to go with a little bit of a bold one. I know this is something I put down as a free bet on one of my things that I utilize. But for me, I'm going to go with Albert Okwuegbunam as the guy who's going to catch the first touchdown pass for the Broncos this upcoming season. And kind of, for me, thinking about, okay, how are the Seahawks going to play the Broncos defensively? Well, you think about Quandre Diggs, Jamal Adams. Where are they going to move these guys around? Because they're emulating the Vic Fangio style of defense. That's something that Pete Carroll found was super important for them to go out this year and try to do, was emulate that 3-4 system, that hybrid 2-high shell. I'll be very intrigued there. But I think there's going to be a lot of attention on guys like Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, as you mentioned. I think it opens things up because what we've seen from Albert Okwuegbunam, especially against the Dallas Cowboys enjoying practices, in the red zone, the Broncos in there, I think Albert O might be the first guy who catches a touchdown pass for this Broncos team here in 2022. Broncos country, let us know down below what your pick is. But now, Sarah, let's transition to the next category. Who has the first defensive takeaway, and what type of takeaway is it? Is it an interception? Is it a fumble recovery? I'm going to go with you first.
I put this in my bold predictions post on Predominantly Orange for the week, Cody. And I love bold predictions because it's like, how crazy do I want to get, But again, I'm going with somebody on this roster breaking a very, very long drought. And you know what? Ronald Darby, the guy hasn't picked off a pass since the 2019 season. Not only, Cody, am I going to say that he gets the first takeaway of the season, but I'm going to go ahead and say that Ronald Darby has himself a pick six to kick off the Broncos turnover party here in 2022. Geno Smith, back when he was a starter early on in his career, I know he's very different now. This was like 8 years ago, but very early on in his career, there were no quarterbacks in the NFL that threw more pick sixes than did Geno Smith when he was a full-time starting quarterback for the New York Jets. So I'm not just saying that because I'm down on Geno Smith. I think he's probably a really great guy, and he's obviously, he won the starting job there. But I'm going to go ahead and say that Geno throws a pick six to Ronald Darby to get the turnover party started in 2022.
All right. Hey, I like it. I'm going to go with the cliche pick here, though, and I think it's going to be off of a tip pass. I think Geno Smith is going to try to attempt a pass across the middle of the field a little bit vertically. It gets tipped up into the air, and guess who comes down with it? Justin Simmons, who's been the leading interception guy for this Broncos team for the last 2 years in a row. I'm going to go with him as my option there. But I do like the bonus. I like the fact that Ronald Darby gets a pick with your pick, and not to mention a touchdown, which is the great equalizer. If the Broncos can score at any point on defense against the Seahawks, that is tremendous for maybe what they can do and maybe what they can do in terms of putting their stake on the claim. Like, hey, you know what? We're going to get things rolling this season for this Broncos football team. I like it. Now we get on to the next category here. Who has the first sack of the season for the Denver Broncos? Because thinking about it, it could be an edge rusher. It could be a defensive lineman. It could be a linebacker. It could be a nickel, or it could even be a safety at this point. So where are you going to be bold at here on your selection here? Who gets the first sack of the season for this Denver Broncos team?
You're right. It really could be anybody, couldn't it? I was thinking about that. I think I'm going to go, though. I'm going to go with the obvious one here. I'm going to say Bradley Chubb. And, he gets that Captain C on his jersey this season, the first time in his career. I feel like Bradley Chubb has a lot to prove this season, whether he's getting a long-term deal or the franchise tag from the Denver Broncos. I have no idea. Or if he's going to get to hit free agency, we'll kind of wait and see. But for the time being, I think first things first, reestablishing himself as one of the top tier pass rushers in the game, which I believe he was, Cody, at a couple of different points. When he was fully healthy, Bradley Chubb was capable of going out there and kind of wrecking games. So to me, I'm going to say Bradley Chubb goes out there and gets the first sack this season.
That was my pick as well. I'm all in on Chubb, and I've been saying this as well on my radio show. A healthy Chubb is a good thing for this Denver Broncos football team. Can he get back on the right track? We saw Von Miller, former Bronco, get off to a hot start to kick off the season, fully healthy. Can Bradley Chubb do the same thing in a Denver Broncos uniform? I like that. I'm going to go with Chubb as well. And then our final category of today's episode of the show on our Broncos props against the Seattle Seahawks. Who has the first rushing touchdown? In my opinion, I think this is going to be a huge one because it could come from a running back. It can come from maybe jet motion, an end-around play. It could come from your quarterback. Where are you leaning here, Sayre?
What if I'll just say something crazy, Cody. I'm gonna say KJ Hamler. Let's just try to call a shot here because I did predict also in my bold predictions post. I said KJ is gonna have multiple plays of 50+ yards in this game. I think, wait, why not predict a big booming outburst from him in his first game back from injury, other than the preseason game that we got to see him? What if KJ Hamler has like a 50 or 60-yard touchdown run? You know what I'm saying? Like, that would be cool. That would be fun to see. And again, I'm not saying maybe all these things, I don't know, maybe they won't all happen, of course, but man, wouldn't it be cool if they did?
Yeah.
So like you said, maybe that little jet motion or something like that, KJ Hamler for a big, long touchdown run. I think that could be a lot of fun. I'll try to go outside the box there. Obviously, we know there's other guys, but I think I'll try to go out the box and see if I can be the only one to say it.
I'm glad that you brought that up. Outside the box is kind of how we think here, Lockdown Broncos. I think the cliche one, and we're probably going to hear a lot of it, is Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon. I'm going to be bold here. In his return to Seattle, Russell Wilson will have a quarterback sneak for a touchdown against his former team, and it'll be the first rushing touchdown that the Broncos have to kick off the 2022 NFL season. Make sure you share us your Broncos props down below in the YouTube comment section, or tweet us on Twitter at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Locked On Broncos. But Broncos country, that'll wrap up today's episode of the show. Free and available everywhere you get your podcasts, or whether you watch us on YouTube, hit the subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, coverage, and more. On Monday, leading up to kickoff with the next episode of Locked On Broncos, here's what you can expect. Our 3 keys to victory, including, can Russell Wilson help bring the Broncos across the plane here in the red zone? He helped the Seahawks have a top red zone offense in 2021. Can he do the same thing for the Broncos here in 2022? That's one of the big keys. You get that and much more on the next episode, Lockdown Broncos. Video airing on YouTube on Sunday, audio podcast on Monday. We have you covered.